"Take the pretty one," her father whispered to the Duke, gesturing toward Jasmine. But the Duke's eyes had already found someone else, the sister painting in the shadows, the one with the limp they'd tried to hide, the forbidden sister, the one no one was supposed to see. What did he notice that everyone else had missed for 23 years? Hello, lovely souls. If you're drawn to stories where worth isn't measured by perfection, where love sees beyond society's narrow standards, I'd be deeply grateful if you'd show your support with a like or subscribe. It helps these tales of authentic love reach others who need to hear them. And please, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt invisible because you didn't fit someone else's definition of perfect? The afternoon light slanted through the glass panels of the conservatory in pale golden streams, illuminating dancing motes of dust that drifted like tiny spirits through the still air. Lady Sienna Knowles sat perched on a worn wooden stool, her brush moving with careful precision across the page before her, capturing the delicate details of the Phalaenopsis amabilis that bloomed in defiant beauty before her eyes. The orchid was magnificent, ivory petals edged with the faintest blush of pink, its form both simple and impossibly complex. Sienna's fingers, stained faintly with watercolor, worked to render not just its beauty but its truth, the cellular structure of its petals, the intricate architecture of its roots, the evolutionary perfection that Darwin himself had marveled at. Beside her illustration lay her copy of On the Origin of Species, its pages worn soft with reading, margins filled with her own careful observations in cramped handwriting. Here, in the warm greenhouse air that smelled of earth and moss and growing things, Sienna could breathe. Here, nobody watched her with that particular expression, the one that mixed pity with disappointment, that seemed to say, "What a shame about the limp." She shifted on her stool, adjusting her position, and felt the familiar tightness in her left leg. The limp had been with her since childhood. Illness had stolen some essential strength from the limb. It wasn't dramatic, not a drag or a lurch, just enough of an irregularity to mark her as damaged goods in her father's eyes. Enough to make her unmarriageable, enough to render her invisible. The sound of carriage wheels on gravel shattered the conservatory's peaceful silence. "She's returned! Lady Jasmine has returned!" The housemaid's excited cry echoed through the manor's stone corridors, followed by the rapid patter of feet on marble floors. Sienna looked up from her painting, brush suspended in midair, and listened as the household stirred to life with an energy it rarely possessed these days. Doors opened and closed. Voices rose in cheerful greeting. Even Mrs. Hartwell, their aging housekeeper, could be heard hurrying down the main staircase with uncharacteristic speed. Sienna remained in her chair, watching the dust motes continue their lazy dance, undisturbed by the commotion beyond the conservatory doors. Her sister had been to London, a 2-day journey that had consumed the household's conversation for the past week. New gowns for the season, the finest silks, colors that would complement Jasmine's golden hair and rose-petal complexion. Sienna had heard it all discussed in exhaustive detail, though no one had thought to ask if she might need new gowns as well. Not that it mattered. Sienna had long ago accepted her role in the family tableau, the shadow to Jasmine's light, the footnote to her sister's story. She set down her brush and moved to the window that overlooked the manor's front courtyard. Her limp was more pronounced when she was tired, and she'd been painting for hours. Below, servants were unloading trunk after trunk from the carriage, each presumably filled with finery that would make Jasmine even more dazzling than nature had already rendered her. Lady Jasmine Blackwood stood in the center of the activity like a sun around which planets orbited, her golden hair catching the autumn light of 1887, her face animated with excitement. She was beautiful, there was no denying it. Society had declared it so at her debut, and 3 years later, the judgment remained unchanged. But Sienna, watching from her hidden vantage point, noticed what others didn't, the moment when Jasmine's smile faltered, just for an instant, when she thought no one was looking. The tightness around her eyes that spoke of some private exhaustion. The performance of joy that was, perhaps, just that, a performance. The knock on the conservatory door came an hour later. "Your father wishes to see you in his study, my lady," Mrs. Hartwell said, her kind face creased with concern. "Both you and Lady Jasmine." Lord Knowles's study smelled of tobacco and anxiety. Dark wood paneling absorbed what little light came through the narrow windows, and ledgers lay open on the massive desk, their columns of numbers telling a story Sienna had pieced together over the past months from overheard conversations and her father's increasingly haggard appearance. They were drowning in debt. "Sit," her father said without preamble as Sienna entered. He didn't look at her directly, he rarely did. His gaze slid past her as if she were furniture, landing instead on the doorway where Jasmine appeared moments later, still wearing her traveling dress of emerald silk. "I have news," Lord Knowles began, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "The Duke of Cambridge, Jamie Ellis, has accepted our invitation to attend a ball here at the estate. 2 weeks from today." Jasmine's intake of breath was sharp and immediate. The Duke of Cambridge, a decorated war hero, recently returned from service in India, one of the most eligible men in all of England. "This is our opportunity," Lord Knowles continued, his voice taking on the quality of desperation, barely masked by authority. "Our family faces financial difficulties, significant difficulties. The Birmingham property has been sold. We have perhaps 4 months before creditors move to seize this estate as well." Sienna felt the words like stones settling in her stomach. She'd known things were bad. She hadn't known they were this bad. "Jasmine." Their father finally turned, looking at his elder daughter with an intensity that was almost painful to witness. "You must secure the Duke's interest. You must save this family." "Father, Jasmine began, but he cut her off. "You are beautiful. You are accomplished. You are everything a duchess should be. This is your purpose, Jasmine. Do you understand?" Jasmine's face had gone pale, but she nodded slowly. Then Lord Knowles's gaze finally landed on Sienna, and she felt herself shrink under it. "You will attend, naturally," he said, each word carefully chosen. "But remain unobtrusive. This is your sister's opportunity. Do not draw attention to yourself. Do you understand?" The translation was clear enough. Be invisible. Your presence is tolerated, not desired. Fade into the background, as you always have. "Yes, father," Sienna heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. The old familiar pain bloomed in her chest, not sharp anymore, but dull and constant, like a bruise that never quite healed. This was her role. This had always been her role. She returned to the conservatory as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her brush again, trying to lose herself in the precise work of rendering each petal, each delicate vein. The orchids didn't judge. Science didn't care about limps or beauty, or whether you were the daughter who mattered or the daughter who didn't. She looked at the Phalaenopsis amabilis before her, rare, easily overlooked by those who didn't know what to see, but possessing a complexity and elegance that rewarded close observation. But even orchids needed the right eyes to recognize their value. And in 23 years, no one had looked at Sienna Knowles with anything but disappointment or pity. She dipped her brush in paint and continued working as the light faded, creating beauty that no one would ever see. The manor transformed in the week that followed, consumed by a frenzy of preparation that left no corner untouched. Seamstresses invaded the drawing room, bolts of silk and satin draped across every available surface as they worked on Jasmine's new gowns. A dancing master arrived from Edinburgh, his exacting standards filling the ballroom with the repetitive strains of waltzes and quadrilles. In the kitchens, cook consulted elaborate menus while servants polished silver until it gleamed like moonlight. Sienna watched it all from the margins, a ghost in her own home. "No, no, Lady Jasmine," their father's voice carried from the music room where he coached her for the 100th time. "You must be charming but not forward, accomplished but not intimidating, beautiful but accessible. The Duke must feel he is discovering you. not being overwhelmed by you. Through the half-open door, Sienna could see Jasmine's shoulders drawn tight with tension, her smile bright and brittle as porcelain. She was practicing conversational topics deemed appropriate for a future duchess: the weather, the latest exhibition at the Royal Academy, perhaps a light observation about literature. Nothing too intellectual, nothing that might suggest an independent mind. "Perfect," their father said, though his tone suggested nothing was perfect enough. Again, from the beginning, no one asked Sienna for her input on the preparations. No one consulted her about flower arrangements or seating charts. A seamstress had appeared in her room with a plain dark blue dress, a hand-me-down from some cousin, hastily altered to fit, and that had been the extent of her involvement in the grand event that would save or destroy their family. She returned to the conservatory whenever she could, seeking refuge among the orchids that asked nothing of her but careful attention. Midnight found her unable to sleep, her mind churning with thoughts she couldn't quiet. The house had finally fallen silent after days of ceaseless activity, and Sienna slipped from her bed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the October chill. Her feet knew the path without thinking down the servants' stairs, through the portrait gallery, where her ancestors stared down with painted disapproval, to the east wing that had stood sealed and silent for 7 years. Her mother's library. Lady Eleanor Knowles had been a naturalist, an intellectual, a woman whose curiosity about the world had been deemed unnatural by her husband. When she died exhausted, Lord Knowles claimed, by pursuits unsuited to her delicate constitution, he had locked her library and forbidden his daughters from entering. But Sienna had been picking locks since she was 16. The hairpin slid into the mechanism with practiced ease, and the lock gave with a soft click that sounded like permission. She slipped inside and closed the door behind her, letting the familiar sanctuary envelop her. Moonlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with forbidden knowledge. The smell of old paper and leather and dust filled her lungs like incense. This was sacred ground, a cathedral to curiosity, to the life of the mind, to everything her father had tried to suppress. Darwin's complete works occupied an entire shelf. Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women sat beside Hooker's botanical texts, medical journals, scientific correspondence, her mother's own research notes on the local flora of Gloucestershire, written in the same cramped handwriting that Sienna had unconsciously adopted. For 7 years, Sienna had been coming here in secret, teaching herself everything the world insisted women shouldn't know: botany, natural philosophy, mathematics. She'd found her mother's list of correspondence, naturalists at Cambridge and Edinburgh and Oxford, and had begun writing to them under the pseudonym S.K. Hartwell, contributing observations that had actually been published in the Botanical Society proceedings last year. Her work on orchid hybridization in response to climate variation had advanced the field's understanding of adaptive morphology. No one knew it was written by a 23-year-old woman with a limp who wasn't supposed to exist. She lit a candle and opened her observation journal, making careful notes about the Phalaenopsis amabilis specimen. Her handwriting was precise, scientific, methodical. Then, at the bottom of the page, she allowed herself one moment of unguarded honesty. "Here, I am not invisible. Here, my mind matters more than my body. If only this room were the whole world. You've been coming here? All this time?" Sienna's head snapped up, heart-hammering. Jasmine stood in the doorway, wrapped in a dressing gown, her golden hair loose around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide with shock as they took in the books, the journals, the evidence of Sienna's secret life. "Please," Sienna whispered, fear sharp in her throat. "Please don't tell Father. This is all I have." But Jasmine didn't leave. Instead, she crossed the room and sat beside Sienna on the worn leather sofa, her fingers trailing across the pages of the observation journal with something like wonder. "You've been learning," she said softly, "actually learning. Not just performing accomplishments for display. It's the only place I matter," Sienna admitted. Jasmine was quiet for a long moment, studying her sister's face in the candlelight. I would trade every ball, every suitor, every moment of being looked at to know what it feels like to be truly seen. You've found something real here." The words hung between them, revealing a wound Sienna had never suspected existed. "Do you ever feel like you're disappearing?" Jasmine asked. "Like you're becoming what everyone expects until there's nothing left of you?" "Yes," Sienna breathed. "Every day. Except here." They sat in shared silence, two sisters trapped in different cages, one by invisibility, one by visibility, both suffocating in their own way. "There was someone," Jasmine said suddenly, her voice barely audible. 3 years ago. Someone who saw me. Really saw me. But father—" She broke off, unable or unwilling to continue. Sienna reached for her sister's hand and found it trembling. After a moment, Jasmine seemed to shake herself, reaching for one of the journals on the side table. "What's this?" "An article about the Duke of Cambridge," Sienna said, "from the Royal Society newsletter." Jasmine read aloud, her voice gaining strength. "His Grace is a generous patron of scientific advancement and has recently published an essay advocating for women's admission to scientific societies." She looked up. "Listen to this quote. Intellectual capacity bears no relation to the body that houses it. To exclude half of humanity from pursuit of knowledge is to impoverish knowledge itself." Something dangerous unfurled in Sienna's chest hope, fragile and terrifying. "What would it be like," she whispered, "to discuss ideas with someone like that, to be valued for one's mind?" Jasmine's look was knowing and sad. "You deserve that, Sienna. You deserve to be seen." They separated before dawn, slipping back to their respective rooms before the servants woke. Sienna stood at her window, watching the sky lighten from black to gray to pale gold. Her mother's books, still warm in her memory. Hope warred with resignation in her chest. In 7 days, the Duke would arrive. In 7 days, her father would present Jasmine as the jewel of the family, and Sienna would fade into the background as she always had. But for one dangerous moment, holding her mother's books, feeling the weight of her own hidden accomplishments, she let herself imagine, what if someone saw her? Not the limp, not the disappointment, not the invisible daughter. What if someone saw her? Before we continue with the night that changed everything, I want to ask something from the heart. If this story is resonating with you, if Sienna's journey is touching something in your own experience, would you take just a moment to like this video and subscribe? It truly helps more people discover these stories of authentic love and worth. Your support means the world. The evening of the ball arrived with the inexorable quality of fate. Sienna stood before her mirror while Mary, the lady's maid, fastened the buttons of her dark sapphire gown. It was beautiful in its simplicity, elegant lines, modest neckline, no excessive embellishment. Beautiful, but designed specifically not to outshine. Her hair had been arranged simply, pulled back to reveal her face without the elaborate curls and ornaments that adorned Jasmine's golden locks. No elaborate jewelry graced her throat, only the simple pendant that had belonged to her mother, a small silver locket she'd hidden from her father's inventory of her mother's things. "Remember, Sienna." Her father's voice cut through her thoughts as he appeared in her doorway, his expression severe. Unobtrusive. "Jasmine must shine tonight." "Yes, father. If the Duke speaks to you, be polite but brief. Direct his attention to your sister." His eyes bored into hers. "Do you understand? This is our family's last chance." "I understand," she whispered. He nodded once and left, and Sienna caught her reflection in the mirror. Who was she beneath all this invisibility? She'd spent so long making herself small that she'd forgotten if there was anything else left. Her hands trembled as she fastened the locket. The ballroom had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Chandeliers blazed with what seemed like 1,000 candles, their light reflected in the polished floors until the room glowed like captured starlight. Flowers had been brought from Edinburgh hothouse, roses and lilies that filled the air with perfume. The orchestra from Manchester tuned their instruments in the gallery above, and every person of consequence in Gloucestershire had arrived in their finest attire. Then Jasmine made her entrance. She descended the main staircase like sunrise breaking over a dark world, her emerald gown catching the light until she seemed to glow from within. Gasps of admiration rippled through the crowd. Their father stood at the bottom of the stairs, beaming with unmistakable pride as he offered his arm to his jewel, his salvation, his perfect daughter. Sienna watched from her position against the wall, where shadows pooled and the invisible daughters belonged. The Duke of Cambridge arrived precisely at 9 o'clock. Jamie Ellis was tall and dark-haired, with the bearing of a man who had commanded troops in distant lands. There was something in his eyes, a wariness, perhaps, or a weariness that suggested he'd seen more than any ballroom could contain. The formal introduction was executed flawlessly. The Duke bowed to Jasmine, offered appropriate compliments on her appearance and their home. His gaze passed over Sienna briefly. She curtsied, and he nodded with polite acknowledgement before returning his attention to her sister. Then he led Jasmine to the floor for the opening waltz. They danced beautifully together. Jasmine had been trained for precisely this moment, and she moved with the grace of poetry. The Duke was an accomplished partner, his steps sure and practiced. They made a striking pair, exactly as they should. But Sienna, watching from the margins where she could observe without being observed, recognized something in the Duke's expression. Polite interest, yes. Appropriate engagement. But there was a distance there. A performative quality to his smile. He was here because he should be, not because he wanted to be. Going through the expected motions of courtship like a man fulfilling an obligation. She understood that feeling intimately. When the waltz ended and the Duke escorted Jasmine back to their father, when the crowd pressed close with congratulations and observations, Sienna slipped away. No one noticed. No one ever noticed. The conservatory welcomed her like an old friend, its glass walls silvered with moonlight, the air warm and rich with the scent of growing things. Her limp was more pronounced now. Anxiety always made it worse, and she'd been trying to hurry without drawing attention. But here, finally, she could breathe. She returned to her stool and her painting, to the Phalaenopsis amabilis that bloomed in patient beauty. Darwin and Hooker lay open beside her observation journals. She lost herself in the precise work of rendering cellular detail, the world narrowing to brush and paper, and the quiet truth of botanical science. She was so absorbed that she didn't hear the footsteps. That's Phalaenopsis amabilis, the lovely moth orchid. Sienna startled violently, her brush nearly flying from her fingers. She whirled to find the Duke of Cambridge standing in the conservatory doorway, genuine interest on his face as he studied her painting. Panic seized her throat. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be seen. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, stepping forward. "I didn't mean to startle you. I needed air." The ballroom was overwhelming. The word escaped before she could stop it, and she froze, horrified at her own boldness. But the Duke smiled, not the polite, distant smile he'd worn while dancing with Jasmine, but something real and surprised. Yes, exactly that. His gaze fell on the books beside her painting. "Darwin? Ambitious reading for a ball?" She didn't know what to say, how to explain. "It's merely a hobby." "Your Grace." He moved closer, studying her illustration with an intensity that made her heart race. "That's not a hobby. That's scientific illustration. The cellular detail. The root structure, that's professional quality work." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You're familiar with botanical illustration?" "My mother cultivated orchids," he said softly. "She had an entire collection at our Cambridge estate. Phalaenopsis amabilis was her favorite." Something in his voice, grief, perhaps, or memory, made Sienna forget her fear for a moment. She had good taste. They're evolutionary marvels. Darwin wrote extensively about their adaptive mechanisms. "She died 3 years ago," the Duke said. "I haven't been able to enter her orchid house since." He gestured to the painting. "Your illustration. It's exactly how she would have rendered it. Scientific precision with genuine appreciation for beauty." And then, somehow, Sienna was explaining her observation methods, discussing Darwin's theories on orchid evolution, mentioning Hooker's work on distribution patterns. The words poured out of her like water from a broken dam, years of solitary study finding voice for the first time. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, catching herself. "I'm monopolizing your time." "Please don't apologize." The Duke's expression was intent, alive in a way it hadn't been in the ballroom. "This is the first genuine conversation I've had in months. Tell me, have you read Wallace's work on natural selection? There's a passage about orchid specialization that would interest you." Time disappeared as they discussed coevolution and adaptation and the extraordinary mimicry in orchid blooms. Sienna forgot to be invisible, forgot to hide, forgot everything except the pure joy of being understood. "You correspond with naturalists, don't you?" the Duke asked suddenly. Sienna froze. "What makes you say that?" "I recognize the observation style. I've read work exactly like this in the Botanical Society proceedings." He studied her face. "The pseudonym, S.K. Hartwell. The article on orchid hybridization in response to climate variation. That was you, wasn't it?" Terror and exhilaration warred in her chest. How did he know? Would he expose her? "Your work was brilliant," he continued gently. "The methodology sound, the conclusions compelling. I cited it in my own essay on agricultural adaptation." "Sienna," her father's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "What are you doing here?" He stood in the conservatory entrance, fury barely masked beneath his social veneer. Then he saw the Duke and his expression transformed into false warmth. "Your Grace, I apologize for my daughter's intrusion." "Lady Sienna hasn't intruded," the Duke said calmly. "I sought refuge here and found excellent company. We've been discussing botanical science. Lady Sienna's knowledge is extraordinary." "She has peculiar interests," her father said dismissively. "I hope she hasn't bored you. Lady Jasmine was asking after you, Your Grace." But the Duke ignored the hint entirely. Instead, he turned to Sienna. "Might I call on you? I would very much like to continue our discussion. Not call on the family. Specifically, on her." Her father's face cycled through shock, confusion, and alarm. "Yes," Sienna whispered, "if you wish." The Duke bowed and departed, leaving her to face her father's rage. "What did you do?" he hissed. "What did you say to him? You were supposed to stay invisible, not interfere." "I didn't do anything," Sienna said, her voice shaking. "He found me. He spoke to me. We'll see that it doesn't happen again. He's meant for Jasmine." She walked away, her limp pronounced with exhaustion, and sat in the darkness of her room, replaying every word, every look, every impossible moment. For the first time in 23 years, someone had looked at her, truly looked at her, and seen not a limp, not a disappointment, not an invisible shadow, but a mind worth knowing. It was terrifying. It was impossible. And against all reason, she desperately wanted it to happen again. The morning after the ball, Sienna descended to the breakfast room to find her father already there, a letter in his hand and triumph in his eyes. "The Duke has sent word," he announced. "He'll call this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Relief flooded his features, and he immediately began issuing instructions. Jasmine would play the harp. She would serve tea with perfect grace. She would display the accomplishments that made her the ideal duchess, elegant, accomplished, beautiful. "You may be present, Sienna," he added as an afterthought, "but remain quiet. This is your sister's moment." Jasmine's smile was strained as she murmured, "Of course, father." But Sienna saw what their father didn't: the tension in her sister's shoulders, the knowledge in her eyes. Jasmine had seen the Duke's attention in the conservatory. She knew where his interest truly lay, even if she couldn't quite believe it. Sienna felt dread settle in her stomach like a stone. She didn't want to witness the Duke courting Jasmine, didn't want to watch him perform the rituals of courtship with her sister while she sat invisible in the corner. But to refuse would raise questions she couldn't answer. She would be invisible, as instructed, as always. The Duke arrived at precisely 3 o'clock, punctual as clockwork. He brought flowers, a beautiful arrangement of hothouse roses, that he presented to Jasmine with appropriate formality. "Lady Jasmine, you look lovely this afternoon. I trust you're well." "Very well, Your Grace." "Thank you." Jasmine accepted the flowers with perfect grace, her posture flawless, her smile carefully calibrated. "Your performance on the harp last evening was exceptional, the Handel piece particularly." "You're too kind." It was all perfectly correct, perfectly distant, perfectly formal. The Duke stood near Jasmine's chair, making appropriate conversation about the ball, the weather, the upcoming season. Everything a proper courtship required. Then he crossed the room to where Sienna sat in her corner, a book in her lap as always. "Lady Sienna, what are you reading?" Her father's expression flickered with alarm, but he couldn't interrupt, not without being openly rude to a duke. Sienna held up the volume. "Voltaire's Philosophical Letters, Your Grace." Ambitious reading for an afternoon. The Duke settled into the chair beside her, his full attention turning to her like sunlight. "Have you reached his thoughts on English empiricism yet?" "I have. His observations on Locke are particularly interesting." "You disagree with his conclusions?" "Not entirely, but I think he oversimplifies the distinction between rationalism and empiricism. The question of whether true knowledge can exist independent of experience seems more complex than either Descartes or Locke acknowledged." And just like that, they were lost in conversation, debating Voltaire's ideas on religious tolerance, the contrast between French and English philosophy, the limits and possibilities of human reason. 30 minutes passed in what felt like seconds, the exchange of ideas creating an intimacy that needed no physical touch. Across the room, Jasmine sat with the roses in her lap, watching. Their father frowned, uncertain how to redirect the conversation without openly insulting their guest. But this wasn't what was supposed to happen. This wasn't the plan. When the Duke finally rose to leave, he bowed to Jasmine and thanked Lord Knowles for their hospitality. Then he turned to Sienna. "I look forward to continuing our discussion, Lady Sienna." Not, "I look forward to calling again." Specifically. Continuing their discussion. The moment the Duke's carriage pulled away, her father's fury erupted. "You must engage him more," he told Jasmine. "Ask questions. Show interest in his conversation." "I tried, father." Jasmine's voice was quiet, controlled. He was speaking with Sienna. "Then speak louder. Be more charming." A flash of hurt crossed Jasmine's face before she controlled it, nodding obediently. Then he turned to Sienna. "I don't know what you're doing, but it stops now. Answer if spoken to, but don't encourage conversation. He's being polite to you because you're present. Don't mistake courtesy for interest." Sienna nodded, confusion warring with hope in her chest. Perhaps her father was right. Perhaps the Duke was simply being kind to the overlooked sister, out of pity or politeness. The intensity of their conversation in the conservatory might have been nothing more than momentary interest in an unusual subject. But she couldn't quite make herself believe it. The Duke called again 3 days later, bringing botanical prints, rare orchid species from Southeast Asia, supposedly for the household's enjoyment. Jasmine served tea with flawless grace. The Duke thanked her with appropriate courtesy. Then, "Lady Sienna, I brought something that might interest you." The prints were extraordinary detailed illustrations of orchids she'd only read about. They discussed distribution patterns, climate adaptation, the ethics of collecting rare specimens from their native habitats. Another 30 minutes evaporated in passionate debate. 3 days after that, he brought a collection of Wordsworth's poetry. Jasmine accepted it graciously, expressed her appreciation. "Lady Sienna, have you read Wordsworth's Lucy poems?" They debated whether poetry or prose better captured truth, whether emotion or reason provided clearer understanding of the world. Jasmine excused herself midway through, and neither the Duke nor Sienna noticed her departure. By the fourth visit, the pattern was undeniable. The Duke would arrive with appropriate gifts, engage Jasmine with appropriate courtesy, and then gravitate to Sienna as inevitably as water flowing downhill. Each time, the rest of the room would fade away, until there was only the exchange of ideas, the thrill of being genuinely understood, the dangerous intimacy of two minds meeting without pretense. Time disappeared when they spoke, creating something neither acknowledged but both felt. Sienna was in the conservatory, seeking refuge among her orchids, when Jasmine found her. "He's courting you, not me." Sienna looked up from her painting. "He can't be. I'm not. You are." Jasmine's voice was firm. "Whatever you think you're not, you are to him." "Jasmine, I'm not angry." Her sister's voice broke slightly. "I'm relieved. And that makes me feel terrible. I don't want to marry him. I never did. But I hate that I'm failing." Tears gathered in her eyes. "What's wrong with me that he'd rather talk to you about philosophy than look at me?" "Nothing's wrong with you," Sienna said, her heart breaking. "Everything's wrong with me. I'm sorry. I'll tell him to stop. I'll refuse to see him." "Don't you dare." Jasmine's voice turned fierce. "For once in your life, take what you want." The fifth visit came 3 days later. This time, the Duke made an unusual request. "The afternoon is remarkably pleasant. Might I impose upon your hospitality and request a walk in your gardens? I was hoping that both Lady Jasmine and Lady Sienna might accompany me." It was proper 2 ladies, 1 gentleman, a chaperoned walk. Lord Knowles couldn't refuse without appearing churlish. They strolled through the gardens, the Duke offering an arm to each sister with perfect propriety. But when they reached the rose arbor, a maid appeared, as if summoned. "Lady Jasmine, your mother requires your presence. She asks that you come immediately." It was obviously contrived. Jasmine's look of understanding confirmed it. But she couldn't refuse her mother's summons, which left Sienna alone with the Duke. Improper, dangerous, wrong. "Sienna," he said quietly, using her given name for the first time. "I need to speak with you, truly speak with you." And in that moment, standing in her father's garden with a Duke who should have been courting her sister, Sienna realized with terrifying clarity, this was no longer polite conversation. This was something else entirely, something dangerous, something impossible, something she wanted with an intensity that frightened her. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm listening." "Your Grace, this isn't proper." Sienna's voice trembled as she glanced toward the house. "We should return. You're expected to court my sister." She tried to retreat to the safety of social rules, the rigid structures that had governed her entire life. But the Duke didn't move, didn't step back to restore appropriate distance. "I know what's expected," he said quietly. "I'm far more interested in what's true. May I speak honestly with you, Sienna?" The use of her given name, intimate, presumptuous, thrilling, made her breath catch. "I came here expecting nothing," he continued. "A duty visit, an appropriate gesture, the search for a suitable wife to fulfill obligations and produce heirs. Your sister is lovely. Accomplished, everything a duchess should be by society's standards. Then you should. When I speak with her, I feel nothing. Polite distance. Like admiring a portrait in a gallery, beautiful, certainly, but fundamentally separate from me." He took a step closer. "But you, when we speak about ideas, about science, about anything that truly matters, I feel alive again. For the first time since Kandahar, I feel genuinely alive." "She's beautiful," Sienna said desperately, defending her sister, defending the natural order of things. "She's perfect. She would make you an excellent wife." "I don't want perfect." The Duke's voice was firm. "I want real." "I am not real. I'm invisible. I've been invisible for 23 years. You're only invisible to people who aren't looking." His gaze held hers. "I'm looking, Sienna. I see you. Your mind, your passion, your authenticity. Tell me honestly, do you feel nothing when we talk?" The question hung between them like a blade. "I feel everything," she whispered, the admission torn from her. That's the problem. Don't you understand? I'm not supposed to feel this. I'm the one with the limp. The one father hides, the unmarriageable daughter. The words came faster now, years of pain spilling out. When I was 10, I overheard father tell mother I was damaged goods. He said my limp made me an embarrassment, a burden. He was relieved when I started hiding, when I made myself small, made everything simpler for him. Her hand moved unconsciously to her left leg. For 13 years, I've believed him, that something in me is fundamentally broken. You say you see me, but what you see is incomplete. Flawed. Her voice broke. Society will mock you for choosing the crippled sister over the beautiful one. Your children will be ashamed of their limping mother. The Duke was quiet for a long moment. Then, "May I tell you something I've never told anyone?" She looked up, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "After Kandahar, after the siege, I started having episodes." He spoke carefully, as if each word cost him something. "Panic attacks. I can't breathe, can't think. Feel like I'm dying. They come without warning in ballrooms, during dinners, even in sleep." Sienna's breath caught. "A duke doesn't have psychological weakness," he continued. "It's a contradiction. A military hero with a broken mind? Impossible. Shameful. I've been performing normalcy while drowning internally. Not even my family knows." He met her eyes, his own haunted. "You think your limp disqualifies you? I think my broken mind disqualifies me. We're both hiding wounds. Both been told we're fundamentally unworthy because of them. But what if we're wrong? What if we're both complete exactly as we are?" "Sienna, I'm terrified," he admitted. "Terrified of having an episode in front of you. Of you seeing how broken I really am. But your honesty, your refusal to pretend, it makes me believe I don't have to be perfect either. We could be imperfect together, real together." She opened her mouth to respond, but footsteps on the gravel path made them both turn. "Sienna!" Her father's voice was cold with fury. "House. Now." He saw them standing close, saw the intimacy in their posture, and something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Then he turned to the Duke, his expression transforming into false warmth. "Your Grace, I apologize for my daughter's forward behavior." "Lady Sienna has been nothing but proper," the Duke said calmly. "I'm the one who requested private conversation." Lord Knowles was forced to accept the explanation, but rage simmered beneath his social mask as he escorted the Duke back to the house for his departure. In her father's study, Sienna stood before his desk like a prisoner awaiting sentence. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "You're sabotaging your sister's future. Everything depends on this match." "I'm not doing anything. He chooses to speak with me. I can't control. You're encouraging it. Your blue stocking displays. Your intellectual pretensions." "Pretensions?" Anger sparked in her chest. "You mean my thoughts? My actual mind? You will stop this immediately." His voice turned to ice. "When he calls again, you'll be absent, indisposed, ill. I don't care what excuse we use, but you will not be present." "You're asking me to hide." The words came out flat. "Again. Always hide." "I'm asking you to remember your place." Something inside, Sienna snapped. 23 years of invisibility, of making herself small, of accepting that she was less than it all erupted at once. "And what is my place?" Her voice rose. "To be invisible so Jasmine can shine. To erase myself for family convenience. To spend my entire life in shadows because I had the misfortune to survive childhood illness with a limp." "You are being hysterical." "I am being honest." The word rang through the study. "For the first time in my life, someone sees me. Actually sees me. Not as Jasmine's shadow, not as the disappointing daughter, but as myself. And you cannot bear it because it doesn't fit your plans. Our family is facing ruin. I have every right to exist." The words tore from her throat. I have every right to be seen, to be wanted, to matter. The silence that followed was deafening. Sienna turned and walked out, her limp pronounced with exhaustion and emotion, before the tears could fall. She found Jasmine waiting in the hallway. Her sister had heard everything half the house had probably heard. "Don't you dare hide for him," Jasmine said fiercely. "For once in your life, exist loudly." "Jasmine, I can't, he wants you. Father needs—" "There's someone else for me." Jasmine's voice was quiet but certain. "Someone I lost 3 years ago, Dr. Zhou. Father forbade it because Zhou is half Chinese, because he's merely a physician working in Birmingham's slums. But he wrote to me last month. He's never stopped loving me." She took Sienna's hands. "Maybe if I'm free of this expectation, I can find him again. Maybe we can both choose what we want instead of what we're told to want. Father will never allow it. Then we'll find a way around Father." Jasmine's smile was sad but determined. "I'll speak to him tomorrow. Tell him I don't want the Duke, that I release him from consideration. What happens after that is up to you and his grace." That night, Sienna lay awake, replaying the Duke's confession, his panic attacks, his hidden suffering, his insistence that she was complete, not broken, his dangerous invitation to be imperfect together. We could be real together. The question consumed her. Did she have the courage to stop hiding, to be seen fully limp, fears, inadequacies, all of it, and believe she might still be wanted? The answer terrified her. Because for the first time in 23 years, she desperately wanted to say yes. Jasmine found their father in his study the next morning, already hunched over ledgers that held nothing but diminishing numbers. "I won't marry the Duke," she said without preamble. "I don't want to." Lord Knowles looked up slowly, as if he hadn't quite heard correctly. "This isn't about what you want. It's about survival. He doesn't want me either." Jasmine's voice was steady. "He wants Sienna." "That's impossible." Her father stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "Unthinkable. 3 years ago, I fell in love." The words came quickly now, before courage could fail her. "Dr. Zhou. You forbade it because he was half Chinese, because he was merely a physician. But he wrote to me last month. He's returned to England. He's working in Birmingham slums, saving lives." Her voice softened. "He's worth 10 dukes. A physician of Chinese heritage?" Lord Knowles' face flushed. "You would destroy us for this? We have 4 months before creditors seize everything. The Duke is our only hope." "I can't make someone forget her," Jasmine said quietly. "She's unforgettable." The invitation arrived 2 days later on thick paper embossed with the Duke's crest. The Duke of Cambridge requests the Blackwood family's company for tea at Cambridge Estate. Lord Knowles held it like a holy relic. This is it. He's making his formal offer. He assumed, of course, that the offer would be for Jasmine. The entire household descended into frantic preparation, new dresses pressed, carriages polished, every detail perfected. Sienna watched the chaos with growing resolve. Before the Duke said anything, she would tell him about their financial desperation. He deserved to know he was being pursued for his fortune. If his interest survived honesty, then perhaps it might be real. The Cambridge estate was magnificent in a way that spoke of intellect rather than mere wealth. Through open doors, Sienna glimpsed a library with floor-to-ceiling books. Through windows, an orchid conservatory gleamed with careful cultivation. Everything suggested a mind that valued learning. Tea was formal, proper, every social ritual observed with precision. The Duke was courteous to everyone, his conversation pleasant but carefully surface level. Lord Knowles grew visibly hopeful as the minutes passed. Then the Duke set down his cup. "Lord Knowles, might I have a private word with Lady Sienna?" Her father's smile faltered. "Your Grace, that would be irregular." "Nevertheless, I ask your permission." It wasn't really a request. From a duke, it was a command wrapped in courtesy. Lord Knowles nodded, though uncertainty clouded his expression. The Duke's study door remained slightly ajar, propriety maintained, but the space felt intimate regardless, lined with maps and scientific instruments and books in languages Sienna couldn't identify. "Before you say anything," she began, her voice steadier than she felt, "I must tell you something." The Duke waited. "My family faces financial ruin, complete ruin." The words came faster now. 4 months until we lose everything. The estate, the income, all of it. Father brought Jasmine here hoping she'd secure an advantageous match. That's why he's desperate for your attention on her. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "You deserve to know this because I won't have you discover later you were deceived. Whatever this is between us, it must survive honesty or it's worthless." The Duke's expression didn't change. "I know," he said quietly. "You, what?" "I make it my business to know the circumstances of potential allies. I learned of your family situation before I ever attended that ball." Sienna felt the floor shift beneath her. Then why come? Why pursue connection with a family in crisis? Because financial circumstances have nothing to do with the worth of a person's mind or heart. He moved closer. "I didn't come seeking a transaction, Sienna. I came weary of loneliness. I came hoping to find I don't know what. But I found you." The silence stretched between them, weighted with implications. "I want to settle your family's debts," the Duke said, "as a separate matter from us." "No." The refusal was immediate. "That would mean I came to you out of necessity." "Then don't let it mean that. Let me do this for Jasmine's sake, for your parents' sake. But what happens between us should be separate from financial obligation." He took a careful step closer. "I want your choice to be free, Sienna. Genuinely free. No debts, no obligations, no pressure. Just two people discovering whether what we found might grow into something more." Sienna's breath caught. Nobody had ever offered her freedom before. Her entire life had been about hiding, performing, erasing herself to make things simpler for others. And now this. The invitation to exist, to choose, with no strings attached. "Will you let me do this?" His voice was soft. "Will you trust that my interest in you isn't contingent on your family's gratitude?" "I'm terrified," she whispered. "I know. So am I. But I'm asking anyway." The words hung in the air between them, fragile and dangerous and full of impossible possibility. "Yes," Sienna heard herself say, "but I need time to understand what this means, to trust it's real. Take all the time you need. I'll speak with your father today about the debts." The Duke's expression softened. "And then, if you're willing, I'll court you properly, openly, with no obligation binding us." When they returned to the drawing room, the Duke took Lord Knowles aside. Their private discussion lasted 20 minutes. When her father emerged, he was pale, stunned, unable to quite process what had just transpired. Sienna watched from across the room, feeling terror and hope in equal measure. That night, lying awake in her bed, she felt the weight of invisibility finally beginning to lift, not because someone saw her, but because she was choosing to be seen, choosing to trust, choosing, for the first time in 23 years, to want something for herself without shame. 2 weeks after the Duke settled the family debts, the whispers began. At the modist, while Sienna examined fabric samples, the Duke courting the plain one, perhaps grief has damaged his faculties. At afternoon tea, voices deliberately pitched to Carrie. Imagine choosing the crippled sister over the beautiful one. What could he possibly be thinking? In servants' halls across Gloucestershire, "My cousin in London says all of society is talking. It's quite the scandal." Sienna tried to ignore it, tried to believe the Duke's assurances that she was enough. But each whispered comment was a knife finding its mark, reopening wounds that had never truly healed. The breaking point came while shopping with Jasmine. 2 women in the adjacent room spoke loud enough to ensure they were overheard. "Damaged goods," my mother called her. "The unmarriageable daughter. He must be mad to pursue this." Jasmine confronted them immediately, her voice sharp with fury. "My sister has more grace in one gesture than you'll achieve in a lifetime." But the damage was done. Sienna's fragile confidence cracked like porcelain. Lady Pemberton's garden party invitation arrived 3 days later. The elite of Victorian society would be in attendance, a test Sienna desperately wanted to fail by staying home. "I'll plead illness," she told Jasmine. "The Duke specifically asked you to come." Jasmine held up the soft blue gown they'd chosen together. "We face them together. You're not invisible anymore." The gardens should have been beautiful manicured hedges, golden afternoon light, ladies in their finest gowns like exotic birds. Instead, it felt like an execution ground. Every eye turned as Sienna entered on the Duke's arm. Lady Pemberton's circle positioned themselves strategically near an uneven stretch of gravel path. As Sienna approached, they forced her to walk across it, making her limp more pronounced. "Oh, Lady Sienna, do be careful on those stones." Lady Pemberton's concern was theatrical, her mockery barely concealed. Fans fluttered, knowing looks exchanged. Then came the public attack. "Your Grace," Lady Pemberton's voice carried across the garden. "Surely you've noticed Lady Sienna's difficulty with mobility." The Duke's expression remained neutral, but Sienna felt him tense beside her. "One must consider the practical implications for a duchess's duties," Lady Pemberton continued. "The physical demands of social obligations, the expectations of producing heirs." The implication was devastatingly clear. Sienna was physically deficient, unsuitable, doomed to fail. Every insecurity Sienna had ever harbored rose up to validate Lady Pemberton's words. Every fear confirmed. They were right, she was selfish to let this continue. She would destroy his reputation. She should release him from any obligation. Her vision narrowed. She couldn't breathe. The Duke didn't argue, didn't defend her verbally. Instead, he offered Sienna his arm. "Walk with me, Lady Sienna." He deliberately chose the steepest path, the most difficult terrain in the garden. Half the party watched as they began to climb. His hand was steady at her elbow, not supporting, but accompanying. They walked slowly, deliberately, making her limp visible to everyone, not hiding it, presenting it. At the summit, overlooking the party below, the Duke's voice carried across the garden with military precision. "My mother had a limp, carriage accident in her youth." He paused, letting the words settle. "She was the strongest woman I ever knew. She ran 3 estates, negotiated with Parliament, raised 5 children, and walked these same people with their perfect gaits into submission more times than I can count." The silence was absolute. "If Lady Sienna's limp troubles you, Lady Pemberton, perhaps your definition of capability requires examination." He wasn't defending Sienna. He was challenging their values. The message was unmistakable. The problem wasn't Sienna, it was their shallow judgment. Then, quietly, "Just for her. Don't let them make you small again. You've hidden long enough. Let them see you, all of you, and let them choke on their own narrowness." The reactions were mixed. Some faces showed shock and disapproval. Others reflected thoughtful reconsideration. The Duchess of Marlborough nodded with unmistakable approval. Younger women whispered with something that looked like admiration. Lady Pemberton stood frozen, furious, and humiliated. Sienna could barely stand, not from physical exertion, but from the emotional exposure. The Duke's hand remained steady at her back. "You stood," he said. "You didn't hide. I'm proud of you." Then Jasmine appeared, and with her, to Sienna's shock, Dr. Joe. "This is Dr. Joe," Jasmine announced, her voice clear and unapologetic. "The man I love." Both sisters claiming visibility, authenticity, choice. That evening, Lord Knowles came to Sienna's room. He stood in the doorway, unable to meet her eyes. "I've failed you," he said finally, his voice breaking. "For 23 years, I've failed you." Sienna said nothing. "I saw only what society valued. I missed what truly mattered." He looked up then, tears in his eyes. "I cannot undo those years, the damage I've done. But I see you now, and I'm proud of your courage, proud of the woman you've become despite me." It wasn't complete redemption. Years of hurt couldn't be erased by one conversation. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement, a tentative step forward. After he left, Sienna stood before her mirror and looked at her reflection really looked, perhaps for the first time in her life. She saw not what she lacked, but what she possessed. Intelligence, courage, authenticity. And perhaps, just perhaps, she was enough exactly as she was. 3 days passed after the garden party. The Duke didn't call. Sienna told herself she'd expected this. Known it, even. She'd ruined everything. He'd realized she was too much trouble, that society's judgment was too costly a price. She should never have allowed herself to hope. Then the note arrived. The Orchid House. Tonight at 8. Please come. J. The brevity was unusual, the timing improper. Something urgent thrummed beneath the formal handwriting. Whatever happens, Jasmine said as she helped Sienna slip out into the evening. You chose to be seen. That matters. The walk to Cambridge Estate took 15 minutes. Sienna's limp was pronounced exhaustion and anxiety combining to make every step uncertain. The Orchid Conservatory was warm despite the rain beginning to fall on its glass walls. The air was thick with the scent of earth and blooms. Orchids everywhere in a riot of colors and shapes, his mother's legacy, carefully maintained. The Duke waited among them, still in his day clothes. His cravat was loose, his jacket discarded. He looked disheveled in a way she'd never seen. What's happened? Sienna moved toward him instinctively. Are you all right? I haven't been all right since Kandahar. His voice was raw. But I'm here. I needed to see you. She saw it then, the shadows under his eyes, the tremor in his hands, the way he held himself as if braced against collapse. After the garden party, I had an episode. The worst in months. The words came with difficulty. Couldn't breathe. Thought I was dying. And all I could think was, what if this happens in front of you? What if you see how broken I really am? His hands shook as he spoke. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Shame was written across every line of his body. This is what you'd be marrying. Not just a duke, but this. Sienna didn't offer reassurances. Instead, she moved closer and took his trembling hands in hers. Show me, she said quietly. Show me what an episode looks like. It's not pretty, not dignified, not ducal. I don't need pretty or dignified. Her grip tightened. I need real. Show me the worst. Let me see all of it. The Duke pulled his hands free, turning away. Rain drummed harder against the glass above them. Do you love me? The question struck like lightning. That's not it doesn't matter if I. It's the only thing that matters. He turned back to face her. Do you love me? Not gratitude. Not obligation. Love. Sienna felt something crack open inside her chest. She couldn't lie to him. Couldn't lie to herself anymore. Yes, the word tore free. God help me. Yes, I love you desperately. Then why? Because love isn't enough when the world will tear us apart. The words came faster now, years of fear spilling out. When your children will be mocked for their limping mother. When you'll have a panic attack at a state dinner, and I'll be blamed for your poor choice. She was shaking now, too. I'm terrified I'll wake up, and you'll see what everyone else sees. The damaged one, the disappointing one, the one who limps, and you'll wonder what you were thinking. I'm terrified of the same thing. His voice was barely audible over the rain. That you'll see me at my worst, gasping for air, unable to think, completely helpless. And you'll realize you signed up for a lifetime of that. The parallel struck them both silent. We're both afraid of the same thing, Sienna whispered. Being known completely and rejected. Yes, he moved closer. So be afraid with me. Be imperfect with me. Be real with me. I'm not asking you to stop being terrified. I'm asking you to be terrified with me and choose this anyway. Sienna thought of 23 years spent invisible, of making herself small, of accepting she was less than everyone else, that her existence was an inconvenience to be managed. She could choose safety in shadows, or terror in the light. I don't want to be invisible anymore. Her voice strengthened as she spoke. I want to be seen by you. Even the broken parts. Even the limp. Even the fear. Even all the ways I'm not enough. The Duke cupped her face in his shaking hands. You have never been not enough. You've always been exactly right. Limp and genius and fear and courage and everything. He kissed her, then desperate. Real. Imperfect. Rain pounded on the glass above them. Orchids surrounded them in impossible colors. Both of them were shaking his panic, her fear, their shared choice to be vulnerable anyway. When they finally pulled apart, the Duke reached into his pocket and produced a ring. It was delicate, the band holding a preserved orchid specimen suspended in crystal. The first orchid you ever illustrated, he said. From my mother's collection. I've been carrying it for a week. Sienna's breath caught. Marry me. Not despite anything. Because of everything. Because you're brave enough to be real. Because you see my broken parts and don't flinch. Yes. The word came without hesitation this time. I choose myself. I choose visibility. I choose you. Her voice was clear, certain, no longer afraid. And in that moment, surrounded by his mother's orchids, with rain drumming on glass and both of them trembling with fear and hope and love, Sienna Knowles stepped fully into the light, not by becoming perfect, but by daring to be completely, imperfectly, authentically herself. Before we reach the culmination of Sienna's journey, I want to speak from my heart. If this story has moved you, if you've felt seen through Sienna's struggle, would you honor that connection with a like and subscribe? These stories reach others who desperately need them only through your support. Please, help more invisible souls find their light. 4 weeks passed. The Duke courted Sienna properly, openly. Society remained divided, some accepting them, others still disapproving, but they were together, real, building something solid. Sienna grew more certain with each day. Still afraid sometimes, but no longer paralyzed. She was learning to exist without apologizing. Her limp remained, but it no longer defined her. Tonight would be the ultimate test, a lecture at Cambridge University. Unprecedented, a woman presenting scientific research under her own name, as herself. The Duke had arranged it, giving her a public platform for the genius she'd hidden for 23 years. In her room that evening, Jasmine fastened the buttons of Sienna's deep sapphire gown. Not gray. Not hiding. You look magnificent, Jasmine said. Not because of the gown, because you look like yourself, confident, ready. What if I fail? Sienna's voice trembled. What if they laugh? What if you succeed? What if they finally see what we've always known? Their father appeared in the doorway. The carriage is ready. The past month had changed him. He was tentatively trying to repair what he'd broken. Sienna, I'm proud of you, whatever happens tonight. The words the first time he'd said them brought tears to her eyes. Joe proposed, Jasmine whispered, as they embraced. Father gave his blessing. We're both free now, both visible. The Cambridge lecture hall was standing room only. The scientific community sat skeptical. Society members expected scandal. Progressive allies hoped for success. Lord Knowles looked terrified. The Duke sat in the front row, steady and believing. Jasmine and Dr. Joe stood at the back, supporting. Sienna ascended the stage, her limp visible to everyone. Her hands trembled as she arranged her notes. She found the Duke's face in the crowd. You can do this. She breathed and began. Adaptive morphology in native British orchidaceae. 7 years of research. Observation. Hybridization experiments. Cultivation techniques. A theoretical framework for understanding evolutionary adaptation. Her voice strengthened as she spoke. Scientific rigor combined with accessible explanation and genuine passion. The initial skepticism in the room gradually shifted. Colleagues leaned forward. Questions came, some genuine, some designed to discredit. Sienna handled each one precisely, acknowledging limitations, defending her methodology with confidence earned through years of careful work. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, then scattered applause. It grew, became sustained. The scientific community stood not in pity, but in respect. Genuine recognition of brilliant work. Even some society members joined, unable to deny excellence when confronted with it. As the applause faded, the Duke stood. He crossed to the stage. Society held its breath. "Lady Sienna Knowles," his voice carried through the hall, "you've spent 23 years hidden because the world couldn't see past surfaces. Hidden because they measured worth by the wrong standards." He climbed the steps to stand beside her. "I'm asking you, here, publicly, in front of everyone who told us this was impossible, will you marry me?" Gasps echoed through the hall. "Not despite your limp, not despite your brilliant mind, not despite anything." He produced the ring with its preserved orchid specimen. "Because of everything. Because you are extraordinary. Because I love you completely." Sienna's vision blurred with tears, but her voice was clear and certain. "I spent 23 years invisible, believing my body made me unworthy. You didn't make me worthy, you showed me I already was." She took his hands. "Yes, I choose myself. I choose visibility. I choose you." The lecture hall erupted not in scandal, but in celebration. The scientific community applauded the engagement. Society was forced to acknowledge what couldn't be denied. Even Lord Knowles understood, finally and completely, what he'd nearly destroyed. The wedding in Edinburgh was intimate. Sienna walked down the aisle with her limp visible, her head high. Her father's arm trembled as he led her, tears streaming down his face. The Duke waited with love and respect, written across his features. Their vows were simple. "I see you. I choose you. I love you." Jasmine married Dr. Joe in Birmingham shortly after. They worked together in the slums, combining her social connections with his medical expertise to establish free clinics. Both sisters free, visible, authentic. The Duke and Sienna established a fellowship program funding women scientists. The first cohort consisted of 5 brilliant women breaking barriers that had stood for centuries. Lord Knowles began attending lectures, supporting women's education. It was a painful process, but genuine his attempt to undo the harm he'd caused. In the Duke's Orchid House, now a full research facility, Sienna presented findings to her first cohort of fellows. Her limp was visible as she moved between specimens, unremarked upon and irrelevant. She explained her research with passionate precision, in her element, brilliant. The Duke watched from the doorway, not with pity or charity, but with simple love and respect for a brilliant mind at work. Sienna caught his eye and smiled, not the grateful smile of someone tolerated, but the smile of someone who knew she was exactly enough. And so Sienna Knowles, the forbidden sister, the hidden daughter, the one no one was supposed to see, stepped fully into the light, not by becoming perfect, but by refusing to hide. She married for love, built a career on her own terms, and proved that worth isn't measured by society's narrow standards but by authenticity, courage, and genuine connection. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply being yourself, limp, genius, fear, courage, all of it, and daring the world to look away. This is the story of how the invisible became unforgettable, how the forbidden became celebrated, how the one no one saw became the one no one could forget. Until our next story, remember, you are not invisible. You are simply waiting to be seen by the right eyes. And when that moment comes, have the courage to step into the light.